July 10, 1940. The skies above southern England erupted in chaos as German bombers darkened the horizon. World War II had reached Britain's doorstep, and the Luftwaffe, Hitler's deadly air force, launched wave after wave of devastating attacks in what would forever be remembered as the Battle of Britain. For months, the relentless assault hammered British airfields, strategic ports, and major cities including London, Birmingham, and Coventry. The Nazi war machine sought total air superiority, hoping to crush British defences and pave the way for a full-scale invasion of the island nation. Yet despite overwhelming odds and constant bombardment, the Royal Air Force refused to yield. British pilots took to the skies day and night, engaging German aircraft in fierce dogfights that would determine the fate of Western Europe. By October 1940, Hitler's invasion plans lay in ruins, abandoned in the face of British courage and determination. The nation stood as a beacon of hope and resistance against Nazi tyranny, its people enduring nightly air raids with remarkable resilience. Winston Churchill's words echoed through the bomb shelters and ruined streets. "We shall never surrender." But what happens when that spirit of defiance is betrayed from within? What drives a person born into privilege, raised in the heart of British society, to turn against everything his country represents? Among the few who chose collaboration over courage, one name stands out as particularly shocking: John Amery, the son of a British lord who would become one of Hitler's most notorious British propagandists. If you're ready to uncover one of history's most disturbing betrayals, smash that subscribe button right now. Join Timeless Words as we bring you the untold stories that changed our world. Hit the bell icon so you never miss these incredible historical revelations. Now let's dive into the twisted life of Britain's most infamous traitor, the troubled beginning. John Amery entered the world on March 14, 1912, in London, England, born into extraordinary privilege and political power. His father, Leo Amery, was a distinguished member of Parliament and Conservative government minister who moved in Britain's highest circles of influence. Leo's own mother came from an intellectual Jewish-Hungarian family in Budapest, though Leo deliberately concealed this heritage, likely fearing it might hinder his political ambitions in the Conservative Party. John's mother, Florence Greenwood, came from equally impressive stock, the daughter of a Canadian barrister and sister to the first Viscount Greenwood. By all accounts, John should have been destined for greatness, groomed to follow his father's footsteps into British politics and public service. Instead, from his earliest days, something was profoundly wrong. At just 2 years old, his nanny described him as a very hard child who suffered violent, uncontrollable tantrums that went far beyond normal childhood behavior. By age 5, his teacher made an even more disturbing observation, calling him an extremely abnormal boy, with a deeply troubling inward focus and what she termed a fixed attitude of an abnormal type. These weren't merely the complaints of frustrated caregivers. They were warning signs of something darker brewing within the young boy. In 1922, when John turned 10, his father reached new heights of political success, appointed First Lord of the Admiralty. The family moved into Admiralty House on Whitehall, one of London's most prestigious addresses. While his father commanded Britain's naval forces, young John's behavior spiraled further out of control. He began his formal education at Miss Ironside's school, a progressive private institution for upper-class children, but the headmistress quickly labeled him unteachable. Private tutors came and went, none able to manage his wild temperament. Eventually, following family tradition, he was sent to Harrow, one of Britain's most elite and respected public schools. Surely, his parents hoped the strict discipline and refined environment would straighten out their wayward son. They were tragically mistaken. At Harrow, John's rebellious nature exploded into full view. He snuck out at night to attend London nightclubs, engaging in activities shockingly inappropriate for a teenage schoolboy. The 1926 Harrow punishment book contains a particularly revealing entry: sanctions for shop stealing and moral breakdown. His housemaster, a veteran educator who had dealt with countless difficult students, remarked that John was without doubt the most difficult boy I have ever tried to manage. Desperate for answers, Leo and Florence took their son to Dr. Maurice Wright, a psychologist who examined the troubled teenager. Dr. Wright's assessment was chilling. The boy had no moral sense of right and wrong. It was as if the fundamental mechanism that guides human behavior, the conscience, was simply absent in John Amery. In a final attempt to stabilize their son's development, his parents sent him to a school for English boys in Switzerland, hoping the change of environment might help. The experiment ended in disaster. John returned having contracted syphilis, a sexually transmitted disease that would plague him for years. Even more disturbing, he confessed to his tutor that he had contracted it through prostituting himself to men. From Oxford reject to fascist convert, despite his chaotic upbringing and behavioral problems, John possessed genuine intellectual ability. In 1929, he secured admission to Oxford University, one of the world's most prestigious institutions. Here was a chance for redemption, an opportunity to finally channel his intelligence towards something productive. Instead, John stunned his family by turning down his place at Oxford entirely, declaring his intention to pursue a career in the film industry. He briefly worked as an assistant director for a small traveling film company, but his ambitions far exceeded his experience and credentials. Using the charm and manipulative skills that would define his later career as a propagandist, John convinced several friends and well-connected family members to invest in an ambitious film project called Jungle Skies, to be shot in Africa. The proposed budget was an astronomical £100,000, a massive sum in the early 1930s. The film never materialized. The project collapsed completely, leaving his investors empty-handed and John's reputation in tatters. Around this time, he suddenly announced his engagement to Una Eveline Wing, an actress he claimed would help restore confidence among his creditors through her supposed wealth. The truth was far seedier. Una was known to police as a common prostitute. The two eventually married in Greece and settled in Paris, funding an extravagant lifestyle through a combination of borrowing from acquaintances and pawning whatever valuables they could get their hands on. In Paris, John's eccentricity reached new heights. He carried his childhood teddy bear with him to cafes, placing it in a chair beside him, ordering drinks for it, and even buying comics for his stuffed companion to read. He also began carrying a loaded gun at all times, paranoid that creditors were hunting him down to collect their debts. According to Una, John continued working as a male prostitute and made frequent visits to brothels. But beneath the bizarre behavior and scandalous lifestyle, John's political views were taking a darker, more dangerous turn. A fierce anti-communist, he began viewing fascism as the necessary counterweight to the spread of Bolshevism across Europe. In 1936, officially declared bankrupt, John left his wife in London and traveled to Spain, where a civil war had erupted. He sided with Francisco Franco's fascist forces, involving himself in illegal gun-running operations and even participating in combat. He later claimed to have witnessed communist torture chambers in Barcelona, experiences that he said deepened his ideological hatred and convinced him that fascism was Europe's only salvation. Around this time, he came under the influence of Jacques Doriot, leader of the French Fascist Popular Party. John traveled with members of this movement through Austria, Italy, and Germany, eagerly observing firsthand the impact of fascist rule. Hitler's British mouthpiece. When World War II erupted on September 1st, 1939, with Nazi Germany's invasion of Poland, John returned to Paris with a new girlfriend, Janine Bardet, another prostitute. After France fell, and the collaborationist Vichy regime took power in June 1940, he initially remained in unoccupied France. But Nazi officials had taken notice of this unusual Englishman with fascist sympathies and an aristocratic pedigree. In October 1942, with assistance from German officer Werner Plack and Count Secchi, a German armistice negotiator, John relocated to Berlin to begin his new role serving the Nazi cause. There, in an astonishing meeting, he was received by Adolf Hitler himself, who approved his presence in Germany and granted him the official status of guest of the Reich. The Nazis saw John as a propaganda trophy, a genuine British aristocrat who had turned against his homeland. He was quickly pushed into Nazi propaganda efforts and offered the opportunity to broadcast directly to British audiences via German state radio. On November 19, 1942, John Amery made his first broadcast. Presenting himself as a true patriot trying to save England from itself, he declared, "A crime is being committed against civilization. You are being lied to. Your patriotism, your love for our England is being exploited by people who for the most part hardly have any right to be English. Between you and peace lies only the Jew and his puppets." This venomous anti-Semitic message was the first of several broadcasts in which John called for Churchill's government to be overthrown, denounced Britain's war effort, and urged his countrymen to support Nazi Germany's campaign against the Soviet Union. While other British propaganda broadcasters like William Joyce, known as Lord Haw Haw, gained notoriety, John Amery's name carried special weight because of his family connections. The British Free Corps betrayal, as his usefulness to Nazi propaganda diminished, John returned to Paris, there, together with Michelle Thomas. Sources differ on whether she was his lover or bigamous wife, but all agree she was known to French police as a prostitute. John conceived his most treacherous project yet. He proposed creating a pro-German British military unit, recruiting British prisoners of war to fight alongside the Germans against the Soviet Union. Even his own father would later condemn this plan as undoubtedly his most heinous offense. The idea of British soldiers fighting for Hitler represented the ultimate betrayal, not just of country, but of the men suffering in POW camps who remained loyal despite their captivity. The project struggled initially, but in early 1943, John reconnected with Jacques Doriot, whose success in recruiting French volunteers for the Nazi cause inspired him to revive his plan. He aimed to form a core group of 50 to 100 men for propaganda purposes, with hopes of eventually expanding into a larger fighting force. John's first official recruitment attempt took place at the Saint-Denis prisoner of war camp outside Paris. He addressed 40 to 50 British and Commonwealth prisoners of war, distributing printed materials and speaking passionately about the supposed need to fight Bolshevism. The reception was overwhelmingly hostile. Most inmates rejected his appeal outright, their loyalty to Britain unshaken despite harsh captivity. His initial recruitment drive was a humiliating failure. He persisted, eventually finding 2 men who showed interest, though only one. Kenneth Berry actually joined what became known as the British Free Corps. John's direct involvement with the unit ended in October 1943, when the Waffen-SS decided his services were no longer required.
control passed to other hands, and the unit was formally renamed and reorganized. The final reckoning. In 1944, as Allied forces advanced and the Nazi Empire crumbled, John traveled to Italy at the invitation of Benito Mussolini, who was desperately trying to maintain the remnants of his fascist regime with German support. By this point, the Axis powers were in full retreat and Italy had descended into chaos. John was captured by Italian partisans who were hunting down fascist collaborators. He reportedly expressed relief when British forces arrived to take him into custody. Captain Alan Wicker, the young British officer sent to collect him, later recalled that John greeted him by saying, "Thank God you're here. I thought they were going to shoot me." Transferred to an internment camp in the town of Turney, John was interrogated by British military investigators. The officers found him strangely detached from the gravity of his situation. He spoke at length about personal possessions he had lost, including his beloved childhood teddy bear and his wife's fur coats, appearing far more concerned about missing belongings than the treason charges he would soon face. At one point, displaying breathtaking naivety, he told investigators, "I don't suppose for a moment they'll bring a charge against me, but if they did, of course, my father would see to it." John was flown back to England, arriving symbolically dressed in full fascist uniform. Complete with jack boots, he was imprisoned in London to await trial, charged with 8 counts of high treason. Under British law, the penalty for treason was death. His family launched a desperate campaign to save him, calling him political favors and even petitioning King George VI. His younger brother Julian argued that John had taken Spanish citizenship and therefore could not legally be guilty of treason against Britain. Meanwhile, his attorney attempted to present evidence of mental illness, supported by John's father Leo, who genuinely believed his son was psychologically unstable. Despite these efforts, the court rejected all arguments based on diminished responsibility. In a dramatic and unexpected turn on the very first day of his trial, November 28, 1945, John Amery pleaded guilty to all 8 charges of high treason. The entire hearing lasted just 8 minutes. His fate was sealed. John Amery was 33 years old when on December 19, 1945, he was executed by hanging at Wandsworth Prison. The executioner was Albert Pierrepoint, Britain's most experienced hangman. According to witnesses, Amery maintained a strange composure until the very end. As he approached the gallows, he turned to Pierrepoint and said, "Mr. Pierrepoint, I've always wanted to meet you, but not, of course, under these circumstances." With that bizarre final statement, the life of Britain's most notorious Nazi collaborator came to an end. The son of a British lord, given every advantage society could offer, had chosen betrayal over honor, fascism over freedom, and paid the ultimate price. The legacy of betrayal. John Amery's story remains one of the most disturbing examples of collaboration during World War II. His journey from troubled child to executed traitor raises profound questions about nature versus nurture, privilege versus responsibility, and the choices individuals make in times of moral crisis. While most Britons endured the Blitz with courage, while brave pilots risked their lives defending their homeland, and while British soldiers fought and died across Europe, John Amery sat in Nazi Germany broadcasting propaganda and attempting to recruit British prisoners to fight for Hitler. His actions represented not just personal failure, but a betrayal of everything his country stood for during its darkest hour. The British Free Corps he helped establish recruited only a handful of men. Historians estimate between 15 and 27 British and Commonwealth prisoners of war eventually joined. While tiny in number, their very existence represented a painful wound in British wartime memory. Each recruit was tried after the war, though none received the death penalty that was imposed on Amery. John Amery's execution served as a powerful statement that betrayal would not be tolerated, regardless of family connections or social status. His father Leo, despite his powerful position in government, could not save his son from the consequences of treason. Justice, in this case, was truly blind. This haunting historical account reminds us that evil can emerge from the most privileged circumstances, that moral failure knows no class boundaries, and that in the end, every person must answer for their choices. John Amery chose wrong at every turn, and British justice ensured he paid the price.
This incredible story of betrayal and justice is exactly why Timeless Words exists, to bring you the shocking, true historical accounts that textbooks often overlook. If this tale gripped you, don't let these powerful stories slip away. Subscribe now and hit that bell icon to join our community of history lovers who refuse to let these lessons be forgotten. Drop a comment below telling us what shocked you most about John Amery's story, and share this video with anyone who loves real history. Your engagement keeps these vital stories alive. See you in the next episode of Timeless Words, where history never gets old.